There we go.
These pretentious people with their microphones.
Right?
Oh, I thought that was your face mask.
It's not like it's not plugged in or anything. Let's see.
Or a breathalyzer, one of those two things. Is that government required then?
I am live.
Oh, now I have to be on my best behavior.
According to this, we are now live on the interwebs. Oh, admit. Oh, there we go. Okay. Great. I'll just do this. Let's see. Okay. Okay, I'll turn this down. Great. So I'm at least aware of what's going on that. So you're still on here, Deb, right? Okay, good.
Yep, I am.
All right, great. So yeah, so I'm gonna hold off just a little bit longer, you know, for people to come in if anybody else is coming in or whatever. But hey, Vicky, how you doing? It's been a while. So yeah, so while okay, here's Matt. Okay. Admit. There's Cece and there's Matt.
Oh, I haven't seen Cynthia forever. Hi, gorgeous.
Look at her hair. It looks nice, huh?
She looks beautiful as always.
Thank you.
Yeah, she's had her days.
You look great too, Deb.
Thank you.
I think.
This is living in a cave look 101.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Alex, how are you?
I'm
Hi,
good.
everyone.
I'm good. This is cool. This is cool. People are showing up. It's nice. So I think I've gone live on Facebook. So I think I'm going to give it just a couple more minutes and then maybe get started and everything. So we're at 3:03. So what do you think is a safe number there, Matt? What do you think? Should I wait 5 minutes? What would you suggest?
I came in late and thought I was late. I would give everyone the benefit of the doubt because I would be a hypocrite if.
All right. Well, that's not a solid answer, but I'll say.
Oh, you're not going to get one from me.
I was looking for 5 minutes.
Professional microphones. I am so impressed.
He's got a microphone too, right? So you know, look at that.
Oh yeah,
Look at this.
got
I'll do it like this.
Let's see
Yeah,
who's
the
got
mic
the
stand.
biggest mic.
There you go. Oh, you see? Oh, look who's talking. Ben's got one. You got a thermos. Dave, you got a thermos.
I had it coming overhead, and then someone on a Zoom made a comment that it looked like a porno, and I had to change the whole setup
Like
after
you had a
that.
boom mic. Yeah.
Yep.
So, Dave, what kind of photography do you do?
I'm a commercial photographer, so no job too small, no fee too high.
Cool.
Just teasing. Yeah, I like client direct. I like agency work. Sometimes I do the PR firm. I don't really do the event stuff, I guess, although these days, in light of paychecks that are absent and long intermittent.
Well, there aren't a lot of events either, unfortunately. So
Yeah,
that's.
would invite
So a
you to.
good friend of mine is Mona Shields. Have you ever worked with Mona? She does a lot of commercial too.
She is a photographer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She's done some work at some of my jobs. She shoots for us.
Good.
I love photographers.
Yeah. My landing page on my BassettStudios.com has a nice little overview. Just did something for the Boy Scouts. It's not on the website, but it was for a capital fundraise. They're in trouble a little bit. They're having to sell their assets, but I worked on a pitch book for the leadership group there. So well, it's not really my day to talk about me, but yeah. It was fun.
Oh, good show.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
All right. So this is great. So it does actually show people.
Yeah, you've got that build order box on there you need to get rid of.
Build
Do
order.
you see it, Alex?
Build order box.
Am I the only one
Yeah.
seeing that?
No, I can see it too. Said no build
Hi,
effect.
Lisa. Hi.
What
where'd
build
it go?
oh. So it's not showing this. It's not showing the full screen.
No, it had a little dirt box.
No, I mean right now I'm showing my full, all
Now it's
How-
just you.
right, what's going on here?
We have this all figured out at 2:00, just so you guys know. It worked perfectly at 2:00.
Mitt. All right. Hey, Lisa. Okay. So let's try this one more time. All right.
There you go.
Are we seeing my Creative Courage logo now?
Yes.
All right, good. All right. So, oh, look at this. I can see more people here. Okay. Like we've all been doing this for so long, you'd think that I'd mastered this by now. Oh, and Jill's here. Everybody say hi to Jill Lagan. She's the
Hello.
Hi,
Boulder City,
Jill.
the Boulder City Chamber.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
This is cool.
So Alex, you want to walk them through how we're going to do this today?
Yeah, sure. See, I got a director. It's great. So that's my wife, Debbie, for anybody that doesn't know. She's going to be helping me out. Like if there's questions throughout this thing, you know, or through she's going to be checking out the chat while I'm talking. So if you guys want to ask a question or something, maybe tell her, you know, I don't mind you interrupting me during the thing. But you know, I'd rather everybody be muted during it. If you have something to say, unmute yourself and then go ahead and say it. Or you can just send a message onto everyone on the chat, and Deb will see it, and then she'll say, okay, hold on, and then she'll interrupt me or whatever. And then afterwards, we can chat as much as you want on this thing going forward and everything. So this is kind of open-ended. I've been doing this talk for like 5 or 6 years now. It's changed and grown and let me see, what is that? Oh, I'm already getting a chat. Okay, so it's changed and grown, and so I wanted to go ahead and just share it with everybody. I did it recently for a large group and hadn't done it in a while, in a couple of years. And I thought, why not just do it? I mean, it's COVID and we're all going. So I'm going to just my standard workshop that I do for everybody. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And I thought I'd do it live on social media too, to see if anybody would be interested in seeing it there. So, oh look, Noah's here. Noah, hi Noah. Congratulations winning the Top Tech Award. You won the Top Tech Award just yesterday. So well done, my friend. Anyway, so what I want everybody, yes, everybody just go ahead and mute yourselves or whatever. And then we'll go ahead and go forward with this thing. All right. So I use this as an example. I use this red curtain as because I like to kind of think of creativity as a theater of the mind kind of a thing. And I, on the cover of my book, I don't know if you've seen it, but I'm holding it up on, you know, with me, I use the curtain in that too. And there's a little light that's peeking out through between the curtain. I'd like the metaphor that I kind of think of sometimes, I think that our creative capacity, I kind of imagine it as a curtain that surrounds us, and everything creatively we do within the scope of the curtain. But when we have a fantastic idea, it's like there's a break in the curtain and we get to see what's on the other side. And that's why I use that metaphor for the curtain. And as our creativity grows and as we allow ourselves to grow, the curtain gets further away, but still surrounds us. But there's always something on the other side that's not always clear or to us or available to us unless we actually find the little breaks in the curtain to do it. So it's kind of a metaphor for that. So one of the things I've done for many years now is to kind of set the table for what we're going to talk about. I like to use the prologue from Henry V. So I like to start off my workshop really boring with Shakespeare, but I like to, the reason is that I don't know if you're familiar with the play or not, but in Henry V, it's about a young king of England who goes to war with France. And the story that he wrote was so massive and grandiose and so huge that he had a dilemma, is that the only access, he didn't have special effects or anything. He was telling this story on this little wooden stage, and he had minstrels playing, and he had people in costumes. And he thought that he's trying to tell such a massive story. He didn't want it to be seen as comical, with these simple visuals. In his mind, it was so big. And he had that dilemma, is how do I break through that? So he wrote the prologue to the beginning of Henry V to kind of ask people to use your imagination don't take what you know and what you see as truth. When you see someone walk up on the stage wearing a crown, I want you to imagine a kingdom. I don't want you to imagine a guy in a costume. When you see somebody walk up, I want you to army. I don't want a guy in a costume. When you see the stage, I don't want you to imagine a simple stage. I want you to imagine the grandiose landscapes of France during a war. So in the prologue, I'm going to share, that's why he says, oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. Like he wishes he had some magic that can make us feel what he was imagining. And so instead of offering up that magic, he's asking people to use their own magic to see it. I think it's a good way to start because everybody has their own perception of what creativity is, their own perception of what their own creative capacity is, and they think of themselves in a certain way. Either you think of yourself as not creative or kind of creative or incredibly creative. I'd like to kind of create a blank slate so that we can kind of go forward together and try to imagine things in a different way. So my credentials is I've been a creative director for over 20 years. My job's been to inspire creativity in people, and for all that time in creative people, and also people that aren't creative, and inspire people that are normally not into it, that are clients maybe, that are maybe accountants and stuff like that. They never really feel like they're creative, and I try to get them to be part of the process. So that's my attempt. So I'm going to start showing some of the prologue from Henry V to get us started. So bear with me.
Alex, make sure there's no one you need to let in the room before you hit start on that.
Oh yeah, it comes up. I think that everybody's so far is in. I think
Okay.
it pops up. I've already let somebody in before. Thanks though. So so I'm going to go ahead and get started with this. And the actors walking through the backstage, and I think of that backstage kind of like our mind, and the perception of our mind. Our mind is so powerful, but we rarely give it the credit that it deserves for how good and powerful it is. So I'll just go ahead and get started with that.
Kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling sea. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, gentles all, the flat, unraised spirits that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or may we cram within this wooden O the very casks that did fight the air at Agincourt? Oh, pardon. Let us, ciphers to this great account, on your imaginary forces work. What is your hopes that now must deck our kings? Carry them here and there, jumping o'er times, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass. For the which supply, admit me, chorus to this history. Who, prologue-like, your humble patience pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play.
So we'll start with a question. What is creativity, right? Everybody has maybe an idea of what it is. If you guys have a thought of what it is, go ahead and share it in the comments and we can hear it. Deb can let me know if you've got an idea of how you would describe it. I'll start sharing my description, but I'll start with in my view, the mythology of what creativity is, but what I think most people believe it is. I think most people think of creativity as just the simple expression of art, whether it's dance or music. It's always associated with something in terms of expressing yourself artistically. And because of this, I think the problem is it's become a bit, out of reach for some people that don't do art, that don't create art. It's treated like it's a lot of times like some kind of a magical gift that was given from some powerful creative God that granted it to us. And that somehow when we were given that at birth, we were just better at some people at creating art and expressing ourselves. But the truth is that it's not that simple. It's actually more than that. The thing that we visualize, the thing that gives us the power of creativity is not an exterior force like this. I use this imagery from Michelangelo because it's interesting that on the Sistine Chapel, when you see that his finger touches Adam's finger, that was an expression of God granting us a soul. But Michelangelo disagreed with that. He didn't think that God granted us a soul. His view was that God had granted us our minds, abilities to understand things. And if you look at the artwork here, he kind of snuck it into the painting because he created the robe around the will of God into the shape of a brain. And that was his way of expressing that this is what the gift was. But he was commissioned by the Pope, so he had to paint what the Pope wanted, but he snuck that in, like a lot of graphic artists do, right, Cynthia? So, so, I think it's a powerful way of looking at this, because we always think that creativity comes from the outside, but it actually always comes from the inside. Creativity is something we use in everyday life. Doctors use it, hairdressers, everything we do is created in law enforcement and in parenting, in the way that you parent your kids. It's something that when we're walking through life, we're never not using our creative process. It's a calculation when you're looking at a problem, figuring out what the answer is. It's the influence, it's the things that we like when we see them that influence us later on in life. It's the use of our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. It's a collection of tokens. What we're doing is throughout life, each of these tokens that we collect represents something that we value or we think is interesting. One could be, for example, a horse, could be one of the tokens that we're carrying as a thing that we know. The other might be a bird or something like a bird. Creativity is the process that we go through when we combine the two things and we turn them into something totally new. Now, everybody's seen the Pegasus, but they don't exist. If I was to express to you, everybody here, now imagine a hummingbird and imagine it being purple with orange polka dots and a top hat with a cigar in its mouth, riding an elephant. Instantly you can picture that, but you've never seen it. It's our ability to take these things, put them together in a split second. And we're never not doing that. I remember when, I did this talk at Zappos, and after I talked about the creative process towards the end, one of the creatives over there said, all this talk is cool and everything, but when do you know to stop your creative process so you can get your work done? And so I replied to him, said, when you're done smelling something, do you pull your nose off your face and put it in your pocket? No, you're always using it. You're never not using it. You notice it sometimes when you're in the process of doing it, and that's when you're aware of it, but it's never not happening and it's never not being used. Imagination is a source of every form of human achievement, and it's the one thing that I believe we are systematically jeopardizing in the way we educate our children and ourselves. It's Sir Ken Robinson, who recently passed away, unfortunately. He was a champion of creativity, and he was always actively trying to make people more aware of what we're doing in the systematic way we educate our kids, or we're stifling a lot of things that are incredibly important in our youth. And that's kind of one of the reasons I do this talk, is because of the importance that I see in that. I do this, a lot of different versions of the talk. I do it for really young kids too. I do it and high school kids, and I've done it for university level kids where we talk about it. I always do it for free for educators. And it's really interesting, the different perspectives you get from young people as opposed to get sometimes from the older people who tend to be more cynical, unfortunately. Does anybody have anything to comment or say right now? Deb, does anybody have anything they want to share?
I can tell you that Cynthia, of course, commented on something that you eventually got to in your definition, which is problem solving. Creativity is problem solving. And I know that you guys use that a great deal in your work. And although Cynthia is a designer by nature, her problem solving, I know, has helped her in other elements of working with you.
Yeah, Cynthia works, for me, with me. And I think there was like 3 incidents where she asked me for help with something. And before I could give her a solution, she came up with the answer. So I've never actually helped her with anything. She's always come up with her own answers to these things. So she's a fantastic problem solver, and in my opinion, the best graphic artist in Nevada. But anyway, that's just me. But going forward,
Matt brought up a good point. Matt said that he thought creativity was connecting dots that wouldn't obviously connect. And
yes,
that's a big part of it, I think.
right. It's two things that seem not that like they're not relatable, and bringing them together to create something new. It's a simplistic way of looking at it, but that is it. Is because a lot of times it's why it says creative courage. It's because sometimes we don't have the courage to meld two things that don't seem relatable, because you just assume that it's not going to work. But the magic happens when you take that risk of trying to bring two things that don't work and you clash them together and you turn them into something new. I'm going to go through some of the things we're going to go over. So deconstructing the creative process is one of the things we're going to talk about. The evolution or de-evolution of creativity, self-awareness, how to encourage creativity in yourself and others, best practices for better solutions, and changing the room. So these are kind of my outline of what we're going to talk about today going forward. It could actually go further or go in a whole different direction depending on maybe feedback from people, because this is a workshop and I'm just talking through the whole thing, but I do like interaction as much as possible going through it, because I just think it's more interesting. And a lot of times people bring up questions that just send us in a whole new way, and you know, and I'm learning too. I'm never not learning. Going forward. This is the thing about my workshop, is that I'm not teaching creativity, I'm reminding people of their creativity, because the hope is that as we go through things, we'll feel familiar, and you'll kind of trying to remember the way we used to think of creativity when we were younger, because as you progress and get older, it seems to shrink a little bit, our perceptions, but we'll talk about that a little bit later going forward. So one of the things I like to think about is when you're in a situation, when you're in a meeting with others, and you're you're brainstorming, and you're looking at people sitting there, and there's people that are quiet, and there's people that are not maybe expressing themselves much at all, and then another person's talking a lot during the meeting. It's important to think of that this is usually what's going on in a meeting. All of us are going through a journey every single time. Right now, you're all going through a journey. And you're connecting dots in your mind, just like you just said, Matt. You know, these things, and it's a huge, vast network going on in your minds. Now, imagine if we could actually see that network in everybody in the room all the time. We would be amazed at the processes you're going through, from this quiet person sitting in the room in the back, not saying a word. But we assume that person clearly doesn't have an idea, or that person isn't really too engaged. We're never not engaged. We're always thinking. We're always going through the process. So the point of this is to value even the quiet people, sometimes reach out to them and pull out ideas from them, or try to encourage them, or create an environment where the quiet people will share. There's a few tricks that you can do with this. And what we've done in Imagine, one of the tricks that we've done during a brainstorm session, is we took a lesson from Disney, and they do storyboarding. And what they do is when you're going through a brainstorm session, you pick a particular topic you want to start to work on. And then what you do is you have everybody at the table take note cards and write an idea. It doesn't have to be a full-blown idea. Maybe it's a few phrases, a few words, or a single word that is some part of an idea that you can interject into the process. And then you take these cards and you put them up on the board. And everybody has to kind of get involved with this. Now, what the nice thing about it is, you can actually see ideas now on the wall. And all judgment is actually placed on a wall rather than a person. So the fear that people have in sharing their idea because they're afraid of looking stupid, it's completely eliminated. And all of a sudden, the quiet ones that would normally be quiet in a meeting or in any type of situation, they write out an idea, they put it on the board. And then when you start analyzing the ideas, it's possible that their idea from the quiet person, somebody says, I love that. That's great. I didn't think of that. That encourages that quiet person to feel more emboldened to share their ideas, because they see the judgment there's no fear there, because it's not on them personally, it's on the card on the wall. It's a gradual, great way to really improve the process of a brainstorm session amongst a creative team that is trying to come up with a solution and an answer. And then eventually you can pick and then there's a few things you do, you pick the best ideas, people put little stars on their favorite ideas and move those to the top. And then it's a good way of kind of going through the process. We've done this a lot, right, Cynthia? We've done a lot of those meetings. and they always turn out really good options and solutions that everybody feels good about because they all had a voice in it. So that is just a technique of how to go ahead and try to
Does
share.
anyone here, would they consider themselves the quiet one in the room? Or are you guys all pretty comfortable? Lisa? Yeah.
Yeah. Great. This is the other thing is there's this mythology that sometimes we have to start from a blank slate in creativity, right? Where, let's see, oh gosh, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go from here? But the truth is none of us ever start from a blank slate because we have an entire lifetime of content that we've been gathering, and we've been carrying with us, that's inside of us, that's it. We only tap into that. And your process of trying to find that data and that content is what you're actually going through. You're not searching somewhere externally, it's already inside of us. So the idea of a blank slate is actually non-existent. Sometimes when people have a tough time starting to write a book or a story or anything, my suggestion to them is always just pick something on your table and start to write about it. A stapler, great. Start writing about how this stapler and start describing it. Eventually, while you're writing, you'll start to process a story that'll develop or something will come out of it. It'll no longer be about a stapler, but it'll get you going in the right direction. It's just, you just need to start going and trust your intuition and trust your ability to start expressing yourself. And starting with anything is fine. We have this thought that—
You say that every exercise doesn't have to have a purpose?
Yeah, well, no, the thing is that you can't not, eventually you're going to have a purpose. That's the thing is, the fear of starting is already causing problems, is you need to just move. You need to move forward. If you're really trying to brainstorm something, you need to just explore things. Whether they make sense or not, sometimes there's a reason these thoughts came to mind. And I'll explain that a little bit later. Your subconscious is always feeding you these tokens that I'm talking about. Now, you don't know why sometimes, but there are reasons for them. Sometimes there's slight little hints to something bigger. So taking these things and moving forward and having the courage to kind of just go. And sure, it might seem foolish and it might seem silly, but a lot of times the silly brings with it a lot of really important things. And great ideas, like you'll be in a situation and everybody's talking about trying to come up with a solution and a joke pops into your head. Share the joke. There's a reason it popped into your head. There might be something in it that is relevant to what we're talking about. There is maybe something in the calculation of how this joke works that is relevant. And you don't even have to know what the answer is. You just express it because now it becomes more data that goes into the room that others might be able to respond to. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you. I'm guessing it has and you didn't notice, but sometimes we are inspired by things people say, surprisingly, that doesn't seem related, but somehow we find the relation in the thing that they say and that it applies to something totally different. It's very, our brains are incredibly powerful and amazing things and have the ability to do these calculations. But a lot of times, like I said, we don't trust it because we think things are so simple that, well, it has to come to me totally finished. The idea has to come to me totally clear. No, we're searching, we're working, and we're managing this thing as we go. Problem solving is another way of saying creativity to me.
There's Cynthia's point.
Right. And this is my favorite way of expressing how problem solving works. So this is the impossible box. It's known as the impossible box. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this box before, or it's obviously an optical illusion. So when you look at it, the thing I like to ask, and this is great because the answer is different depending on who the group is. But I say, how can you build this? If I gave you wood and nails and a hammer, can you build this box? That's my question to people. And a lot of times people say, well, you can bend the wood. No, you can't bend the wood. It's, can you build this thing? And the answer is obviously no, you can't. It's impossible. That's why it's called an impossible box. But this is how we think of problems sometimes. We look at a thing and we make a judgment call based on what we see before us. Before we do any work, we've made a decision. This is impossible. This can't be built. And so how does that encourage our creative process of trying to find a solution on how to build this thing. It stops it because we believe immediately, we believe our own hype where we're saying we can't do this. But if we actually change the way we look at a problem sometimes, we can actually see that it is actually possible to build this thing. It's just the way we were looking at the problem. If we would adjust the way we looked at this particular problem, it would be, the answer would be totally clear to where we have to go or what we'd have to do with it. And the interesting thing about the impossible box, and the best part of this, is that I love the fact that I did one of these workshops one time, and a lady came by, and she brought her kid with her, and I think the kid was like 7 or 8 years old. And the kid said, "The shadow's weird." So that's your hint. When you look at the impossible box, that shadow does not work with the shape of the impossible box. That shadow is a hint towards the fact that what you're looking at isn't really what you see. And it's interesting that a little kid noticed that right off the bat. It's one of the first times in it, that there's always a clue, there's always something. And that when we have too many problems in the world right now that I think on the face value we assume are unsolvable. And my quest is to try to encourage people to think, you know what, let's just work at it. There might be an angle that we're not thinking of here, and we can find a solution. And again, that's why it's called creative courage, because you need the guts to be able to do the work, even though everything in your head is telling you there's no point. It's hard, but it's important. Any questions so far about anything, or any statements or anything? All right. So this is Spanish. Does anybody speak Spanish? Todo es ceremonioso en el jardín salvaje de la infancia. It's Pablo Neruda. And it translates to everything is ceremonial in the wild garden of our infancy. When you're a kid, everything's amazing. Everything is fantastic and incredible. And when you're young, you're learning and you're absorbing, right? And studies show that their creative process is like 10 or even more times more active. Their brains are like incredibly more active than ours are right now, because all they're doing is calculating and taking in information and stuff like that. I remember there was a doctor that was saying, when your kid is on the, eating on the high chair, and they take their spoon and they throw it on the floor, and then you pick it up and you put it back up there, and they take it again, and they throw it on the floor, and you put it back up. They're not trying to be a pain. They're actually studying. When I throw this, it hits the ground, and the big person makes them pick it up and put it back up. And that's interesting. And they're just doing this again and again and again, because they're going through a process of learning. And, it's a lot of times we just think they're being a pain in the butt, but what they're doing is they're actually trying to learn as they go forward. This is a way a lot of us, I don't know if you had kids or anything, a lot of times you ask a kid to draw a person, and they'll draw a picture that looks kind of like this. And I've seen it a lot in kids when they draw a picture, and the adult looks at this and thinks it's super cute. This is a cute drawing. It's so cute. And because the kid doesn't know how to draw yet. And this is such a simplified, unsophisticated way of drawing a person. Eventually they'll learn, and grow and be more creative and be able to draw a better picture. But if you start looking at this picture through the eyes of a child and understand what they're trying to do, understanding that their creative process is more powerful than ours, you should ask yourself the question, when you ask them to draw a person, what is their perception of a person? The perception of a person is, when they're looking at them, is their face. That's the unique thing about them. The eyes are on the face, the mouth is on the face, and the arms are there to just bring food to the face, and the legs are there to move the face around. A person is this to a kid. That's how they identify everybody. So in terms of them trying to draw a person, nothing really matters. They're just trying to express maybe what they think of, which is this. This is the most important part. It's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but it's also incredibly pure. When's the last time any of us have ever approached an idea that purely, where it wasn't about all the worrying about people not thinking that we can draw a person well, because it doesn't matter how the quality of the drawing doesn't matter. It's what are we trying to express, and how direct and pure is that expression when we're trying to do it. These things are tough to do because we've been systematically designed to be afraid of being seen as a fool or as someone who doesn't know what they're doing. But if you're in a safe area and a safe space amongst other people who understand that this is how we get to the best solution, is by putting out as much as we can without threat of being humiliated, a lot of times we're able to kind of really kind of reach new levels of creativity and problem solving, which is
Alex,
very.
would you say that the suggest, like when you're brainstorming, the person that's probably got the most outrageous or untraditional response is probably the person that's being the most creative? If what you're coming with were ideas that everybody immediately recognizes, then you're probably putting forth an idea that isn't that terribly unique. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because you need to value opinions, whether you believe in them or not. They hold value. A lot of times I am positive I'm right about something, and I'll express it, and half the room won't like it. Now, that idea might not be as good as I thought it was, because there's people in the room that I respect. The people in the room that I usually have in the room when I'm doing a brainstorm have all been vetted. They're all people that I've worked with for years who aren't afraid of telling me when they think I'm wrong. And so there has to be this situation where we go ahead and have the willingness to share the big ideas and get them shut down. And then the next day show up and get the big ideas again and get them shut down, and not let that stifle you from one day to the next, to the next, to the next, because it's not about the value of your idea. It's about your ability to put out the content, and then all of us together can actually reach something. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, Matt actually has great feedback because he says that expression component is such a huge component of it too. It's hard to convey a great idea with people who aren't inside your imagination with you. And I was actually going to speak to that, Matt. We're on the same wavelength, is that the ability to express your ideas, that's a whole other phase of that process.
Right.
To communicate effectively what you're thinking or what brought you to that thought.
Right. And I think that this happens when you're in a trust situation with the people you're working with, because it's happened so many times where I'll be conveying an idea and somebody will convey my idea better, where they'll say, what he's trying to say is this, right? Because it's so convoluted. Happens constantly with Brian at my office, where he'll finish my sentence, or anybody, or Cynthia, or people that are trying to express an idea. They'll listen to the process, and they'll see within the craziness of what you're explaining, they'll find the connector that maybe I'm not latching onto, but I'm still, as I'm speaking, I'm exploring, right? Because I see value in that. Because when I'm talking about ideas, a lot of times I'm not sure where I'm going to end up. I start just talking, and my hope is that somebody will start to follow and see, and maybe say, no, let's go this way. And then guess what I'll do? Yeah, okay, let's go this way. Because I've learned that I'm not the keeper of the idea, but I should be the encourager of the idea. And if everybody is doing that, I think that we head in the right direction. It's solutions are not always, incredibly amazing, and the skies doesn't open up and says this is the truth. It doesn't work this way. Sometimes it takes a while to warm up to a concept, but it's a good one. And it leads you, and you don't know until you actually activate it and actually use it how good it is. And what happens is when you try something and it wins and it does well, it encourages you for the next time, and then the next time, and the next time, and you get more emboldened, and it's a more important process. And it's something that's really important for us to consider other people's ideas and concepts going forward. And there are limitations. Sorry?
I was going to say, create a space where people are comfortable doing that.
Yeah. Hey, Noah, you're unmuted. Were you going to say something?
Well, I had very interesting, Alex. I had a thought. I was thinking of an analogy of what you were saying, and everyone here has watched Star Trek, right? The old Star Trek show. You got Mr. Spock and you got Captain Kirk, and every episode they faced some problem that they had to solve creatively, you know, whatever was happening. And Mr. Spock would always come at it from pure logic, and you could only get so far with that. And Kirk would come in from like pure instinct on his end. And once you put the two together, they were able to solve the problem. So I thought that's what I thought of as we were discussing this.
That's a great analogy. I'm not surprised that you came up with the TV show analogy because you're always thinking in those terms. It's great. But you're right. It's the same thing. It's like the professor on Gilligan's Island always had the way of kind of solving a problem. And sometimes they came from the silliness of Gilligan that did something and it sparked an idea, you know. There's a lot of these kinds of things, but I like the idea because a lot of times we lean on logic thinking that logic has all the answers, but it's a lot of times it's both. It's you need logic, but you also need the crazy idea. And sometimes you can bind the two of them and find something new. I always think of the logic being used as a good way to execute the crazy idea, you know, because you have a crazy idea, but maybe it doesn't get executed very well. And you need to use the people that are using their logic to find the best ways to execute those ideas. All right, so creative capacity. So, you know, when we're kids, well, actually, this is a different, I'll go back to that other idea. This is a different thing. So understanding creative capacity is just basically of having an awareness of what you're capable of creatively. And this is everybody, okay, in terms of everybody. So as an example, I think of dreams is to show you how powerful our minds are. So when you think of a dream is kind of like a movie, right? That you're watching a movie. And who is the director in this movie? Who's the writer? Who's the producer? Who's the stuntman? Who's the, you know, wardrobe designer, the cast designer? Who's the best boy, right, Lisa? Who is the one that is actually managing this entire thing? It's you. You're the creator of this amazing show that's going on while you're sleeping.
That scares me.
But then you think also, not only that, not only are you the architect, but you're also in the audience. You're also the one who is watching the show. That's how amazing our mind is that we're able to kind of create. So like, why are you scared of the monster under the bed? You're the one who put the monster under the bed, right? You're the one who's shocked and surprised by all the scary things that happen in there. You put them in there, but you're experiencing them. I think that concept, it shows you the dualistic way our brain works. It shows you that there's two separate things happening. A portion of the brain that you're aware of, and there's another portion of your brain that you don't control and you're not aware of, in your subconscious. And your subconscious is actually the most powerful part of your brain. And you have absolutely no control over it. That's important to understand. You can't control your subconscious, but you can program it. And we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Alex, Matt had a question. Matt, can you clarify your question for me?
Hey, can you unmute Matt? You having my wife decipher your ideas.
Well, you said we're this wasn't a real question. I said, can we outsource any of it? So we
want
can't
to be in charge of all his dreams. He wants somebody else to help.
I said, can we outsource any of it?
You can do anything. I'm sure you could figure it out. You're a creative guy.
I make too many jokes in the chat. I apologize.
There might be some hallucinogenics that can help you.
So conscious and subconscious mind is a big part of this. So the conscious, that's scary, right? So the conscious mind is what we're dealing with right now. It's whenever you're awake. Everything that you're aware of, everything that you're doing, every choice that you're making is your conscious mind making that choice. And that's pretty obvious. But what we want to really discuss when it comes to creativity is your subconscious. Now, subconscious to me is kind of like the way a newsroom works. Your conscious mind is the newspaper. It's everything that has already been worked out and sitting there, and you're able to express it. But the newsroom and the reporters, that's all in your subconscious. Your ability to program your subconscious is important. And an example is, let's just say you decided you want to learn how to play guitar. When you decide you want to learn how to play guitar, your subconscious says, okay, you've given me something that you value. So this is your value. And I'm going to now value guitar, everything about guitars. So even when you're not actively practicing guitar or looking at guitars or reading about guitars, If a guitar is playing in the background in a song, your subconscious is taking notes on it. If you walk into a store and you walk by a guitar, it takes note of that guitar. If you see somebody, it just remembers everything about guitars, right? It just sits there and takes notes. So that when you sit down and you start working on guitar, whatever it is, then it starts doling it out to you. It starts doling it out, all those things, those tokens that I'm talking about. Every one of these things that you're aware of, they're like tokens, and they start tossing them over to you. And those are the building blocks that we use to come up with our solutions. It's the horse and the bird. They given to us by your subconscious. So it's important to think about that, is that if you are curious about a thing and you want to be better at a thing, expose yourself to that thing as much as possible. And that's why travel isn't so important, and going into different places and going into situations that you're not comfortable with sometimes, or trying new things, is so important, because you start to learn and value, and the things that you value start to grow, right? And sometimes you don't know when you're going to find something that is important. And you have to feed that subconscious as much as possible. Like I
So is
said,
that why when you're telling people, you're like reciting a dream, you'll say, this makes no sense,
yeah,
but this is what happened in my dream.
right. And there's probably a reason, but it's your subconscious trying to tell you something. And that's the thing, is it's always code. Sometimes it's not clear. Your subconscious is sometimes just kind of hinting at something and giving you something, and we write it off. Like you'll be going through a brainstorm session, and I always say, like, you know, and all of a sudden an episode of Gilligan's Island pops in. I know I've referenced Gilligan's Island twice, but sorry about that. But you know, it popped into your head. Well, there's a reason. There's something maybe that happened in that episode that's relevant to what you're doing. So why not explore that? Why not talk about that? And you know, you might not figure out why, but it's possible that it has something powerful in it. And I think that you know, that a lot of times some of the best ideas come from regression, or something that you explore that you weren't expecting to yield a good idea, right? Sometimes we're surprised, we're blindsided by something. You know what? I didn't think it. You know what? That's the thing. And a lot of times you hear it from other people saying things, or you see something, and it's sparking something inside you that you've been kind of getting nudged at by your subconscious. Does that make
You know,
sense?
it's interesting. What it reminds me of, Alex, I have vivid dreams every single night. And sometimes I'll feel like telling them to Alex, and I'm saying, none of this makes sense. But as I'm explaining it to him, things start clicking. There's something about me retelling it that it clicks something like, oh, I bet that's because I saw that thing on the news the other day. Or I was thinking of this person about their birthday coming up. That's probably why they were in my dream. But it doesn't work for me until I'm telling you the dream. I know it sounds bizarre, but
No, I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about, is like, you don't know sometimes, but there's reasons for a lot of these things. You know, if you take the time to like actually express them, and not always, it's not like 100%. It's not like you're always living in this riddle that you have to decipher. Just be aware and be open to the weirdness and the quirkiness that pops into your head, or that is expressed by people around you. You know, sometimes, you know, people will say things and you'll be like, what was the point of that? Well, don't just write it off. Actually, maybe think of it. Maybe it might have something valuable in there. All right. Okay, yeah, so this is a problem. So when we're little, our creativity is massive, like I was kind of saying, right? And then as we get older, it starts to shrink down and get tinier and tinier and tinier. And it's, you know, we might get bigger, but our creative capacity starts to shrink, right? So that's like a common thing that has already been proven in science and studies, that our IQ and CQ are two, you know, ways of measuring our creativity and our intelligence. And then as we get older, our IQ gets better and stronger, but as it also, our creative quotient gets lower and weaker as we get older. So, you know, why? This is my question to the group. Does anybody have an idea as to why this happens? Why is it as we get older, we get less creative? Does anybody have a reason or a share? Unmute yourself and you can chat if you like.
We've heard no too many times.
You've heard no too many times. Yeah, that happens, right? You get cynical, right?
I would suggest it has something to do with not doing new things. You get into routines and you stop encountering new things in your life to deal with.
Yeah, because it's uncomfortable sometimes to put yourself in situations that are strange or make you actually to put you in an uncomfortable situation. I have a few that I share here. It's not finding the right role sometimes. A lot of times we put ourselves in situations because we think we have to be that thing. So we put ourselves in situations where we shouldn't even be there. We shouldn't even be that person that we're thinking. And so we kind of settle for what we're capable of doing in a situation we don't feel comfortable in. It's kind of like this quote by Einstein.
Jill's point. Jill commented that weighed down by reality, and I think it clicks with what Noah just said. Is you're just trying to accomplish things, and you don't give yourself the time and space for the actual process. You're just trying to meet deadlines constantly.
Yeah, but what was the wording that Jill used?
Weighed down by reality.
Okay, well, see, but this is a perception of reality. When you're already kind of being cynical about it, because you're thinking that reality isn't allow for us to be who we need to be or who we can be. That as if it's you're blaming it on the thing, when in fact maybe it's just we've kind of just stopped finding a better way of approaching it. It's more likely on us than it is on the other end of it. And but that's just a suggestion as to what I'm thinking about it. Cynicism developed from your perception of failure. That's like being told no all the time. You become cynical and you're tired of hearing no, so you just don't even try. I've already tried this so many times. What's the point, right? You know that cynicism developed from a perception of failure. I think that's our school system sometimes, because we teach our kids that getting an F is bad. But when they leave school, all of us who are in business know that our failures taught us to be better business people. Whenever we made the mistakes that we made, we learned something from those mistakes, and it prepared us. It made us better, and it made us kind of find better solutions going forward. Failure is the best way to evaluate your capabilities. But we teach that failure is a terrible thing in school when we should be trying to figure out a different way of doing that. It just makes people worry and stress out about trying new things and trying to explore things or pushing themselves because they're afraid of failing going forward. Being trapped in yeah.
David commented before you even hit your third bullet point that there's less human need for exploring and discovery, and I think that's so spot on.
Yeah.
We have too many tools at our fingertips that we're not forced to be the inventor, based on our necessity.
Yeah, that kind of taps into my frustration with social media, is because people will share some other creative person's idea as though it's their own and just be done. Like they'll be inspired by a quote and they'll share the quote, but what are they doing with the inspiration? I mean, are they writing their own quote? Are they creating something? Are they putting it into something? I mean, what are they doing with this? I mean, we all feel that inspiration and from little things, and then we just kind of carry them with us, and then we maybe tell somebody about it, and that is equivalent to actually doing something. Hi, Butch. Go ahead and mute yourself on this thing as we go forward, unless you have a question. And Deb is going to be taking, if you have a question, you can type it out and Deb will share it or have you share it. So yeah, trapped in a culture that stifles rather than encourages new ideas. I mean, this is the, being in an environment like many of us sometimes are in an environment that doesn't allow for that. Just be quiet and do your job and don't share. Don't try to make anything better, because you're not qualified to make anything better.
I think it'd be important to point out that what Noah did is pretty extraordinary. He's a well-respected lawyer, but he saw a need based in his day-to-day business with clients, and he fulfilled a need that wasn't even necessarily in his field. I don't know if, Noah, what made you decide to take such a bold step outside your lane like that?
I think it was I think it was just combining my enjoyment of the law and my enjoyment of technology, and kind of recognizing a problem and trying to, and basically putting the two together to come up with a way to address it that wasn't being addressed. I mean,
Noah
Right.
developed.
yeah.
He developed an app that allows any kind of systematic business or company to be able to manage their payments to each other. It's a 3-lock box. It's a pretty innovative. He won the award
It
for.
streamlines the process basically for
Yeah.
contractors and everyone to get paid in a timely manner. But I just found that fascinating, Noah, and I think that that is a perfect example of somebody that, saw a need and could have easily walked away saying, well, that's not my field. I'm good at this. I'm going to stay with this. But I had this great idea and you jumped on it. And I just feel that that was such a courageously creative thing to do. So good on you.
Thank you.
So arbitrary restrictions for the sake of control. I mean, this is just people that are trying to control a situation. A lack of diversity or avoidance of conflicting ideas. These are all stifling ways of stifling the process that causes our creativity to diminish as we go forward. Avoidance of constructive, positive, and negative feedback, and a belief that the difficulty of accomplishing a thing dictates its potential of being accomplished. So these are just some of my thoughts on reasons that we tend to get stifled as we get older on our creative process.
Alex, not to drag it out, but I am intrigued by your bullet point about the lack of diversity. Do you have just a minute to kind of touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, contradictory ideas. I mean, one of my favorite people in the office to brainstorm with is Nadia Zurka. And Nadia is great because her and I, we're different in the way we approach things. And, a lot of times she shuts me down hard on an idea but her points are all well thought out. And they're not coming from a place of, I want to be right. They're coming from a place of being analytical about the potential of an idea. And sometimes, I'm a little bit out there, but there's something I'm missing that's realistic that I didn't consider. She shows it to me and it annoys me because I just so what? Let's just do this anyway. But it needs to be practical and you need to be able to make this thing work. So a lot of times if I have a big idea, I go to her and I say, what do you think of this? Because I want to hear that. I want to hear the conflict. And there is no fear of being stifled by her because it's not meant as a stifle. It's meant as just realism going forward. And it kind of creates this situation that makes a better idea. There has to be an ability for people that have contrary points of view to be able to at least discuss a thing and find areas where they relate and where they agree so that we can move forward. And I think that's pretty evident that this is a problem that we have right now in the world. And at least
diversity also meaning people with different life experiences and
Right.
how we don't necessarily tap into the younger creatives and because we don't live in their world, so we're kind of resistant to it sometimes. Or
Right.
people who are culturally different than us and we're just not educated enough, and having all those different people in the room will inspire you as well.
Right. So, it could be from anything. If you're in a situation where you're thinking, then you immediately make an assumption that person doesn't have, their point isn't as valuable as maybe mine or the people that are like me. Then you're already starting at a deficit during the process of trying to find a good solution, especially if that person benefits from a good solution. You know what I'm saying? So so we all need to be able to be open to things, even though we know it's going to maybe possibly create a conflict or something. We need to kind of create an environment where we're willing to listen to each other and willing to listen to, and yeah, we should be able to have debates and discussions and challenge each other's ideas. I mean, that's important. But it doesn't need to be, you don't need to be afraid of it. You don't need to be hostile about it. You need to just be able to find ways to express yourself and share these concepts. It's just a better way to find the best solution. So this is my secret to creativity. I always kind of tell, I know the secret. Whenever I talk to a young creative, I say, here's the secret to succeeding creatively in your life. You will be a better creative if you realize this one thing. So this is my explanation as to what that one thing is. So in life, you know, when you're going to go through the process of building something new or creating something new, in our minds, it's perfect. It's like a utopian thing. It's this beautiful thing. In our minds, it's way up here. And when we start to work towards building that beautiful thing in our minds, it takes a while, it takes a hike, right? But as we work towards this beautiful ideal that we're trying to achieve, we learn a few things. We learn from failures and success because we have them on the way there. We become emboldened by what we learn. As we're going, we're discovering things new. We begin to have higher expectations of ourselves too as we go, because things are getting better and we're getting closer to this thing. But what actually happens in this process of growth while you're heading towards this utopian perfect thing that you're trying to build is your expectation and the vision of what that utopia is gets bigger and further away. And that we discover that a lot of times the creative process is us just walking up a hill towards the utopia that we will never reach. Because as we get better and as we grow and as we get more skilled at a thing, our expectations of that thing grow higher. And that is depressing to a lot of people, is that I've always just wanted to paint a painting like the Mona Lisa, and you work towards that kind of thing, and it just gets further and further away. If you think of anybody that you idolize, if you're a guitar player and you are a musician and you idolize Prince, well, Prince is doing the same thing. That's why he's Prince, is because his expectation of himself always gets further away the closer he gets to it. And he keeps working towards it. And that's what makes you better. That's what makes you a better creative, is to keep going forward. But it's also frustrating because you also feel like you never reached your potential. And so that frustration, living with that frustration, is a difficult thing. And it causes depression. It causes all sorts of problems in people. And we've lost some great artists because of this feeling of never being able to feel adequate, even though everything you create, people around you think is amazing and people think is great. But to you personally, it never feels like good enough. And that not feeling good enough is something that needs to be manageable, and to realize that the voyage is the value in the voyage, not the destination. If we start valuing the voyage and appreciating the voyage to become a better creative, then you're in a better place than being upset because you're not as good as you think you should be. Does that make sense? Okay. So a little bit of discussion about the brain is, these are typical things that people talk about. The left brain is logic, thinking, and analysis and accuracy. It's part of the analytical part of your mind. And then the right brain is the more creative part of your mind. It's all the emotional stuff, the feelings and stuff. And we either feel like we're one or the other, right? You're either left brain or you're right brain. A lot of people say, I'm a left brainer, and other people, I'm a right brainer. Well, the truth is that we're both. All of us have both. We may favor one to the other, but it's important to understand that the best way our process is that we have two sides to ourself, in which your creative brain has an inspiration. You have to execute that inspiration. So you use the other part of your brain to figure out how to execute it. You need a technical mind to be able to weigh all the realities, to be able to express this thing. But you also have to have the whimsical side. So you have the whimsical and the analytical to execute it. Now, if you only had whimsical, if you're only whimsical, nothing would ever be accomplished. You'd have all these great ideas that went nowhere. And a great idea poorly executed is a crappy idea, right? So, but if you're only analytical and you're not allowing yourself to be creative or to take this, then you're missing out there too. You're not delivering anything good. So it's important to kind of think of the fact that we're always dualistic about how we approach things. And also in terms of a group, that's why you want to have analytical people in a creative meeting. You don't keep them out. You want them there because you need those groups of people to be able to help you. They're the ones who say, all right, that all was interesting and that was great. Now who's going to do what? Who's going to accomplish what? How many times have we been in a creative meeting where at the end of the meeting, nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody has an assignment. Nobody knows where they're heading, but everybody feels fantastic because they think that everything they were saying was genius. And then they leave feeling great, and then nobody knows anything. And then nothing happens, and then it dissipates. And oh, I never signed anything. I mean, this is something that is pretty common. So everything that happens in your mind also happens in groups, right? It's the same kind of process. It's very similar. All right, so there's moments of discovery is an important thing if you're trying to grow creatively, is to understand moments of discovery and understand that all of us have them. And what a moments of discovery is something in your life that happened to you. And it could be almost anything, but the thing that's different about it is that it impacted you so much, it puts you in a direction that made you who you are today. So it could be something that was told to you by somebody that you cared about. It could be something that was done to you by someone you hated. It could be done in any situation. It could be something you heard. It could be something you read. It could be a song. But a moment that happened to you that really defined who you were and what direction you were going in. All of us have had them, but I don't think all of us really remember what they were. So what I'm going to suggest is that everybody here start thinking about what those moments were in your life that put you on a path. Was it the influence of somebody, or was it a teacher? Or was it, and what do they do exactly? And just remember those moments, because when we start to log those moments and remember them, they help us define and encourages us to understand who we are going forward. Because we don't really all know exactly who we are. We think we do, but learning about those moments really defines who you are. And it's important to have those stories. And when you have these moments, you find yourself using them as metaphors and ways of explaining things and ways of sharing your views. You could tell a story of something that happened to you as an example to help somebody understand a little bit more about you, or help them understand your viewpoint a little bit more. And it's just good to have these stories. So this is one of my personal stories that I like to share. And then after I share it, I would really like to hear if any of you have any of those stories to share with the group, because I think it's kind of interesting. So this is a painting that I did, and I worked at my dad's frame shop. My dad had a frame shop, and in the frame shop, he would do these very elaborate frames of gold leaf, and he used gesso and wood and carved wood and stuff like that. And he had canvas, and he had paint that he would lay under the gold leaf, so that when he'd scratch it, he'd be able to see some of the color through the scratches of the gold. So these are the colors I had in my dad's shop when I was a kid. I was like 15 years old, and he had canvas, so I learned how to stretch my own canvas. And he had wood, so I was able to make the frame. So I was able to learn how to stretch my own canvas and use the paints. So I didn't have to spend a dime. I just used all of his supplies. And this was actually originally a Marlboro ad that I went ahead and I took and changed it from a cowboy to a Native American. He's got the fist up, but what the cowboy was doing is holding a lasso in his hand when in the actual ad. Anyway, this is a pretty big painting, and I painted it one day. And then my dad, was very encouraging, my mom and dad. So there was the Orange County Fish Fry. So they paid for a little square for me to be able to put all my paintings, and I sat there to try to sell them to people during this event, this fish fry event over in Orange County. And I was sitting there, and this was the largest painting that was sitting there. And while I was sitting there, there was different booths. Like the one right next to me, there was a lady who was making a bunch of things out of old beer cans. Like she'd have a lamp, and she'd have hats, and she'd have all sorts of crazy stuff. And then at the very end, there was a POW booth with a bunch of really tough looking old guys, Harley Davidson looking guys that were in this POW booth. And one of them walked over, and he, as he was passing me to get probably some fried fish or something, he stopped when he looked at this painting, and he walked up to it and he started staring at it. He started telling me like a story about when he went to Vietnam, and when he actually experienced getting off that helicopter and landing in the jungle. And he met with a company that was there already, that had been there for a while, and they were beaten up, and he was talking about how beat up they were, and he was terrified. He was young, and he was sitting there, and one of them actually told him, here, come over. And he started explaining to him all the stuff he needed to learn to live in the jungle. And this guy was a Native American. He taught him all about his culture. He taught him what it meant to be a man and what it was to survive in the jungle. And he told him more than what he needed to know. He became a mentor to him out there and became a really close friend to him. He became a father figure. And he said that he didn't know his dad when he grew up. And this man kind of took that place, took the place of a father figure for him. And during the war, while he was out there, during a firefight, he was killed and he died, and that he wiped him from his memory, he said. I wiped him from my memory because it was killing me and I had to survive this war. And he'd forgotten about him, and he told me until he saw this particular painting. He saw this painting and it brought it all back to him and brought this man back to him in his memory. And he was crying when he's telling me this. And I'm a 15-year-old kid sitting on a stool by a bunch of silly paintings I made. And then one of my paintings brought out this powerful story from this man who'd been to hell and back. And it kind of showed me, I didn't think of this at the time, but it kind of showed me that you need to just create things. You need to just make things, because you never know the impact they're going to have on somebody or what it's going to do. The act of creation sometimes doesn't need purpose. You need to just do it. And sometimes you'll be surprised by the result. And that's something I thought that was important. And I'll never forget that experience that I had with him. I didn't really think of it when I was at the time. I didn't really think too much of it at the time. And the guy didn't buy the painting, which was a disappointment. But it was a powerful moment in my experience as a young person, and learning that the power of art and what it meant to just create something for the sake of creating it. So does anybody have a story they want to share about maybe a moment in their lives of something they heard or something that happened to them that maybe helped them on their path? You don't have to have one. I'm just asking out of curiosity. Does anybody want to share one? Nope. Okay. So we'll move on. Okay. So worst things happen at sea. So this is a pirate ship. And what's on pirate ships? Pirates, right? So and pirates are terrible people. They're horrible, horrible people, right? They're evil, and they're killers and murderers. Well, they have a manager. There's a manager in charge of pirates, right? The captain. And he has to find a way to motivate these horrible, terrible people, right? So right now we're talking about leadership in a situation. So how does a captain of a pirate ship manage his pirates? So what I read one time is that Blackbeard knew that he had a crew that was a vicious crew, and he had to find a way to motivate them and to get them to do what he said. But these guys will cut your throat in his heartbeat. So what he used to do is he used to go down below decks while they were eating and blow out a candle, pull out his musket and just fire it into the crowd and maim or kill one of the crewmen just randomly. And he did this to show them that as crazy as you think you are, I'm crazier, I'm more dangerous, and I'm more vicious than you. And that was the way he tried to instill that fear in people. So this is where I usually ask when I tell this particular part of the story is, has anybody here ever worked on a pirate ship? Anybody? Who's that?
Yeah, that was me.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, so, that is a method of management that is actually pretty prevalent in the world of business and stuff like that, is to motivate people through fear. So when in terms of creativity, it's interesting to kind of think about what are different ways of managing people. So different techniques are extinction, removing something to decrease bad behavior. Another one is punishment, adding something aversive to decrease unwanted behavior. Negative reinforcement, nagging, begging. This is like a parent does this, begging for a good behavior. And then positive reinforcement, acknowledging good behavior. So these are 4 different manners of managing people. All 4 of them are legitimate. All 4 of them work in one way or another. And we've already proven that they all in their own way, but they also create environments and cultures using these methods that people have to function in. Some of these methods create people that are going to be plotting against you all the time, working for you, plotting against you the whole time. Other people are just going to be showing up for a paycheck. And then in other ways, you create environments where people are actually willingly giving you things that are important to them because they are part of the team and they want you to succeed. In terms of creativity, if you're trying to build a creative environment, Positive reinforcement is actually the best way to do it. But it's not just positive reinforcement. It's just being honest with people. When somebody in your group or your team does something good, it's important to tell them right off the bat. Well, you know, when you did that thing, that was fantastic. Good job with that, because this is the result that came from it. When you tell people they do well, when they actually do well, not pandering, when they're actually doing something good that is important, you need to tell them right away, because people need to hear it. People need to hear it. So they're hearing it and it makes them feel good, but it also tells them that they're on track. Because if you're smart and you hired some decent people, these people want to do well. They want to do well. There's a reason that they're there. And if you encourage them, they start to understand what it means, what your expectations are when you start telling them. It also creates a situation that when they fail or when they do something that isn't good, you can tell them with the same energy, in the same way that you do when you encourage them. You have to tell them when they did wrong so that they're clear on that too. And if you're giving them positive reinforcement, the bad reinforcement doesn't hurt so bad, because they know that this is an equal playing field. It's about understanding the expectations. So you create an environment where everybody's honest and everybody's clear-headed about what it is. And when somebody does something bad, you don't wait till next week to talk to them about it. You talk to them about it right away. You don't let things slide. You don't let things sink, because that causes problems too. It has to happen as soon as possible. Being open-minded. It actually, when you're trying to express yourself, or it makes a good situation. This actually works pretty well in most, even outside of work, with friendships and relationships, is when you think something good about somebody, express it, tell them, just, hey, you thank somebody and or send them a text or tell them personally, I love it when you did that. That was so great. You're a great friend because you did that. Or, that thing you did, that was great. When you helped that so-and-so, I respect you because you did this thing. That type of communication creates good environments that are important, and it makes it more open for a better culture and more creative thinking, because it creates a safe environment, which we're talking about. Safe environments are important. So, it sounds idealistic. It sounds like almost like saying that sometimes when I hear myself say it, it sounds like you're just being positive for the sake of being positive. But it's not just that. It actually is smart business. It's good business to treat your people like that, because they bring more to the table, not because they're doing it for a paycheck. They're doing it because they're proud of the work, and they're proud to be associated in a place that appreciates the work. It's just smart. It's a smart way to manage your people. Identify all the things that inspire you. This is a simple thing that you can do. You always see a graphic designer with all sorts of silly knickknacks around their table, because they surround themselves with the stuff they love. Or at your desk, I guarantee you, at your desk, no, you look like you're at your desk. I'll bet you surround yourself with all the things you're proud of. Pictures of your kids or whatever. You got things around you that you're proud of. And there's a reason for that, because you need these little reminders. It's important as you're going through life, or you're working, that you see and you keep reminding things that you're inspired by. So one of the things is this talk. I love this talk. I love doing this talk. And so these are one of the things I make sure that is actively who I am. I'm aware of my kid, Ellie. She's ridiculous and funny and fun. And I get inspired by her. I didn't put Deb here, but Deb too. And then,
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I like getting together with my friends and we play music together. That's a fun thing to do. I like to write stories. I'm working on a book right now that I love to do, and that's part of it too. And I paint a lot, or used to paint a lot, but I like to paint when I paint, and doing that kind of stuff. So it's important to be aware of the things that you love and try to keep them in your life. Don't ever keep yourself from being close to the things you're about. Find a way to keep it close and to do it often, because you need to be happy. it feeds your creativity when you're not always, tense. You have to have good things, mingling. It's hard right now because we're so stifled by everything that's going on in the world. So surround yourself with as much as you can, whether it's music or whatever it is. Just make sure you're feeding that in yourself.
I think it is interesting when you bring up kind of the quarantine that we've all been facing, is so many creative people have said that they expected that they would be hyper productive during this time, but they actually shut down a little bit. And I think it was because that lack of stimulation, that we have in our day-to-day conversations and relationships, it slowed the flow of ideas or inspirations. And I think a lot of people were surprised by that.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, I guess, on who it is that we're talking, because some people did actually go full bore.
Sure.
I know some people went full bore into getting creative. I kind of did. I mean, I started like doing a bunch of stuff, but I know that other people are stifled. But it's because where are they getting their inspiration from? If they're getting their inspiration from personal relationships with people, it's really kind of a tough thing. So these kinds of events, doing this kind of a thing, kind of tries to improve on that. But anyway, so this is the creative arc is an example of how to have a creative meeting with your team. And this is the image that I use to express that idea. And it's an actual literal design that I pictured in my head that I was able to put on paper to describe this. So it's kind of an odd thing for me. And I've used this for many years to try to describe it. So this is the process, this is the process that I look to solving a problem with a creative team. So you have a problem you need to solve. The first thing that you do is you have to establish freedom. You have to establish an environment that allows them to express themselves and to share their concepts and their ideas without fear of judgment. Then you have the exploration, moments where we're actually now going through our research, discussing, we're doing research on the fly, we're discussing areas and learning more about things and making our choices going forward. And then there's this creative reaching that we do. Now the creative reaching is that part of your brain that pulls you away from the obvious process that we're doing. A lot of times you're in this brainstorm session and something crazy comes in, and I've already talked about this, something crazy pops into your head. Allow it to happen. Get off track. This is why it loops around. It loops around like this because you're getting off track, but guess what? You always come back on track because we're all grown-ups and we're all heading in the right direction. We all know this. But don't be afraid of getting off topic and going off and being silly sometimes, because sometimes the best ideas are fueled by that silliness. There's a reason that you're feeling like that. Use it, make it work for you. And then, of course, we need to focus and we need to compress all of these ideas and come up with a solution. So sometimes we have to just make the choices. We have to start tossing out the ideas that don't seem like they're going to work and come up with a compromise and start heading in towards the solution that we need. But don't be afraid to have creative reaches again, even if it's at the end of this thing, because sometimes those have sparked brand new ideas that are actually fantastic. So never be afraid of the creative reaching. And then finally, you do have to come up, then finally, you got to go home and everything. So you do have to come up with a solution. So this is, in my view, a way of a great way of understanding the structure of a creative meeting, is to just kind of follow this particular structure.
So Alex, when you're talking about this and you were talking about the pirate premise, at first it sounds like you're coming across to people that working in teams, but I think the same could pertain if you're a solo worker, like Lisa. Lisa does all of her creativity on her own, but you can also be your own pirate, and you can also be the one that stifles yourself and shoots yourself down.
Yeah, that's like, it's just like when you're talking about the brain, like it's your brain, but it also works in the system. It's the same kind of thing. It's the same rules apply. And so, yeah, you stifle, everybody stifles themselves. That's why it's the same thing with the impossible box. You make judgments before you even, I call it forecasting. Like it's sometimes like when a client tells you, I need you to build me something and it's got to be blue. So right away, you don't think of any other color. You start coming up with a solution and you're thinking in scope of blue. But sometimes the client doesn't know that a blue is the only solution because they haven't done the work. They haven't gone through the creative process. But in their mind, they imagine that the solution is blue. So you need to explore as many things as possible to see if that's the right solution, because it might not be. And if your client is cool, you can approach them with other colors and say, listen, I know you thought it was blue, but what do you think of this color? Or what do you think of this color? Because this is the reason I think this one would work. I mean, you have to have reasons. So that's the thing, is we end up creating these tunnels for ourselves, and we kind of stifle ourselves a little bit sometimes when it's not necessary. And it's important to kind of just be aware that we need to be open even to ourselves going forward. So yeah, you're right. I agree with that. All right, so we're getting close to the end here. So this is kind of my story of the ultimate creative situation where you kind of want to be at. But I want to ask right now, just open it up. Is there anything anybody wants to share, or thoughts or anything, or ideas or anything of what we talked about yet? If there isn't, okay. You can go ahead and interrupt later on if you'd like. So changing the room. So this is an experience that happened to me in Orange Coast College. We had this experimental art class, and we were asked to spend 3 weeks, I think it was, doing art. It could be anything, sculpture, music, anything. It was an experimental art class. And I did this, and this was a carved piece of wood, and it was a canvas draped, and it was like a tapestry, and it was very tall. It was like 9.5 feet tall. It's a very huge tapestry. So I spent all my time painting this. And the thing is, it sat in a room with all the other artwork. So people had seen me working on it. And then finally came to the day where I presented it to the class, and everybody took turns critiquing the artwork as a group as it went up. And when I shared this painting, I didn't have much to say about it. I said, this is a painting I did. I wanted to use a jigsaw, and I carved a piece of wood and everything. And I put a guy in there swimming in some kind of water and stuff. And people were like, dude, are you okay? This is like kind of spooky. You got like a zombie floating in sewage. I mean, do you need therapy? I mean, nobody liked the painting. Everybody was talking about how it was depressing. The guy's drowning. The guy, why would you paint a poor guy drowning who looks like dead already? And it was, all I was getting was this kind of negative feedback. Like he's looking like he just can't make it to the top. He's struggling to make it to the top. Universally, everybody was very negative about it. And I was kind of feeling a little deflated. And then my art teacher, Tom Dowling, waited for everybody to share their opinion. And then he stood up and he said, this is probably the most optimistic painting I've seen all semester. He says, it's funny to me that you see a guy struggling, but his head's above water. And if you look at the water line, it's above all of your heads. And you're all pointing up at this guy, judging him for it. He made it through the muck and got to the top. You're still underwater judging the guy as he's going. So he laid this out in an interesting way, because to go ahead and then all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, I didn't see it that way. And then all of a sudden they started building on that concept, and everybody started liking the painting now as being a positive painting because he shared a viewpoint that nobody was tapping into. So the whole room kind of changed. And I was like, I'm a freaking genius. This is a great painting, you know? I was like looking at it, and he was right. Everybody started changing the way they viewed it. All of a sudden it became a guy who made it to the top and succeeded. So that's kind of a fantastic way that I always think of how you need to always strive to find a new way of looking at a thing and try to tap into that as much as possible. And when you do, and you express it to people, a lot of times people can be so sure of something, but then they'll hear that angle and they'll say, you know what, maybe we need to look at this a little bit differently. And if we all started working that way, we might start finding better solutions to some of the problems that we have, which I think is incredibly important now. We all settle too much on where we think we're capable of. And I just want to make sure people kind of realize that we're actually capable of a hell of a lot more than we think we are going forward. So that's it. That's my workshop. And anyway.
By the way, all those paintings are currently in my garage and for sale.
That's one of the hard things about painting, is just knowing that it's just going to sit in a garage. That baffles me sometimes.
Yeah, eventually that's all we're going through. But okay, thanks everybody. I appreciate everybody kind of showing up and sharing some of your thoughts. Is there any other things you guys want to share or going forward on this thing? I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for your help, Deb. She was a good host. Everybody tell Deb good thanks.
Well, I'm kind of curious, just from my perspective, is there anybody that's dealing with a creative challenge right now that maybe we could brainstorm with you on, or hurdles? I know, Jill, your whole business process has changed with COVID. So you've had to be extremely creative in how you can manage networking events and things of that nature. So you've probably been using that part of your brain in a big way.
So no, I didn't have to use my brain. I just hired Alex, and I'm using his brain instead.
Well,
You
he
use
tells
your
me you
brain
have
to
some good
outsource
ideas.
other brains. Like who was talking about that, Matt?
Yeah.
That's right.
You know, you're very creative, Jill. You know, that's another thing is, and I'm just going to talk about you a little bit. So this is what I love about Jill, is that I don't know if I've ever seen a better leader to a community, because she is looked up to by the community over there in Boulder City. I was so funny because I was hanging out with her, and everybody wanted to say hi to her. Everybody wanted to stop to her and talk, and that shows you that she, you know, somebody with respect, that has the respect that they've earned over the years. That's pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool. It's a pleasure working for you, Jill.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it, and this is great. Sometimes you don't think out of the box, or think that there's even an opportunity to re-look at the box.
Yeah.
And so I do appreciate that. This has been fun.
Good. All right, guys. Well, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. Thanks for all your input. No, I appreciate that. And Vicky, it was great seeing you.
See you. Thank you, Alex. This was fantastic.
Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And Butch, thanks for showing up, man. I appreciate it. Butch is a fantastic teacher. He's a principal and he's great kids. I got to do this for his kids, and they're fantastic.
I appreciate that, Alex. I apologize. I was a little late. I had some technical issues and timing and all that stuff. I was just thinking it was funny.
Show up on your report card. It's okay.
I'm typically like a right-brained, very creative, or I try to be, person. But with this current situation we find ourselves in with COVID, I find myself stifling some of that with people, because I feel like right now I need to keep things simple, because if we get too creative, our kids are going to miss out.
Yeah.
Because we'll be too all over the place. And I kind of feel like I need to bring it in and then slowly reintroduce some of the creativity where and when appropriate.
Well, go ahead, Dave.
The big head. Butch missed that part of the presentation. Alex explained it already.
Yeah,
Butch, it's already covered.
Yeah, I think this is going to be available. I think.
I learned something.
But you're right though, because you're talking about big picture wise. Mm-hmm. But the thing is there's micro and there's macro, right? So you have a bunch of creative teachers, and it's their job to inject all that creativity in the manner in which they teach when they're trying to teach. But on your position, you're in a position where you need to create an environment where they can thrive. So you do have to, maybe you can't be that creative, but you have to create a system that feeds that.
Exactly.
And I think that's your role. And I think that's great. That's where you should.
Creating the system for kids to learn right now is creative. So
right.
Yeah.
Give yourself some credit there.
Right. So I think that in terms of how you're looking at it, I think that again, it's separating the creativity as being art or something incredible. But what it is that you're solving a problem. Your job is problem solving, and it's using the same tools that you would use in coming up with ideas.
Can I ask a question, since as a respected teacher? So my kid, this is her senior year, and she's never been fully engaged with school because she's a hands-on type of learner.
Mm-hmm.
But the assignments that she thrives on and always has are the ones that weren't typical assignments, meaning you have to use your creative brain and create the art piece that goes with this lesson, or something along that, create a play that goes along with the Civil War or something. Is there opportunity for teachers right now to be a little freer with that stuff, or is it all for the kids remote learning that it's all on the computer right now?
But I feel like we could have a 90-minute session just on that question alone.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that comes down to the site-by-site administration. I feel like there's some of my colleagues who are very much, I'm going to just say it, micromanagers. They like to have other people be puppets and do it this way because I said to do it this way, and they're afraid of that unknown. And what happens if I let go of the reins a little bit and give teachers some freedom to try some new things and spark that creativity? I know it's an interesting year. My daughter's also a senior, and I feel like she also is a bit disengaged. However, my son, who is in 4th grade, I feel like he's absolutely thriving, and I think that comes down to he's with me at my school, so I was able to kind of handpick his teacher. I knew their personalities; they would get along, and my son might be a little too comfortable there, but I like it. He's doing some incredible things. Whereas my daughter, I feel like she does need that that face-to-face interaction, especially when you get into those teen years. Those teenagers get to be such social creatures that they need that interaction, you know. And like I'm thinking about like the reopening surveys. If you have kids in the district, you know, we just had to fill out these surveys. For my daughter, I said probably would be better for her to go to school a couple days a week. Whereas my son, I wanted to keep him full-time distance ed. I feel like, again, he's thriving, he's motivated, he's in tune with everything, he's getting his assignments done. Whereas my daughter struggles more with that. So I think on that end, it's also a kid by kid kind of basis too. Like, I don't know that, and the fact of the matter is right now, I don't care what anybody says, we're still teaching in a crisis mode.
Yeah.
Had I created, my school's name is Clyde Cox. If I created the Clyde Cox Virtual Academy, I probably would have spent the better part of 3 or 4 years developing a program, making sure I had all the resources in place, all the right teachers in place. You got to have the right kids in place too, because not every kid is right for distance education. Then we'd roll it out. We didn't have the opportunity to do that. So there's a lot of factors that kind of go into what we're experiencing right now with the kids. It's challenging, but I can't say enough about the teachers and they're doing an impossible job. And they're not going to cover off the ball.
Yeah.
But you know, it's important. I think that what COVID's taught us, and I think this is something I was learned from a client I work with, is that all COVID really did to systems and organizations is it sped us up. It jumped us into the future. Mm-hmm. If you had a system that was weak or wasn't built or designed and it wasn't functioning well,
wasn't progressing,
that when COVID hit, you just leapt closer to your failures. If you had a system that was working well and it was designed and it was structured solidly, you're able to survive and handle it and go forward. And a lot of times I worry that sometimes the school system was too settled in its ways instead of thinking progressively, and it wasn't prepared for something like this. It wasn't prepared for these kinds of changes. One thing about kids is that they're resilient and they can adapt. And a lot of times the struggle with it seems like with school systems is we create systems. I mean, how else are you supposed to do this? You have to create a system where a lot of kids can fit into that particular system, but kids are so diverse and they learn so differently that boxing them in into this thing, sometimes there are a few that are going to fall through the cracks. There's some that are going to be amazing and there's other ones that are going to fall through the cracks. So the approach, it seems like right now, whatever we do right now, because we're so limited, it's heading in the right direction. It's moving forward and it's going to be positive. But once COVID is hopefully gone, I hope that we revisit this situation and try to become a little bit more prepared going forward. I'm not just talking about the school system, I'm talking about all systems. Because I think
that's an interesting point, Alex, is how many people have found a way to adapt and now will probably, even when COVID is behind us, will continue some of their new processes because they did find a way for it to work. And possibly, Jill, I'm not certain if you guys have done online networking, but that's something Chambers had never thought about before. Who would show up for online networking, right? And then it became, well, we don't really have a choice. This is how we have to do it now, and we need to figure it out. Well, when this is all over, will there still be a space for online networking?
You're exactly right, Deb. And actually, we're finding that we're seeing more engagement because even if people are turning it on and then doing other side work and still being productive, and we get that, we understand, But when we've got, 40, 50 people who jump on a Zoom call, and whereas you'll end up having, 10 people show up in person after dinner or after the dinner hour, it's a completely different concept. Why would we keep doing it that way when it's not as effective? We're going to go with what's effective. And
Right.
so you're exactly right. Everyone's looking at things a little different. I wrote an article and sent out to membership yesterday, and it was specifically that. Things are out of our control, and that's what they are, out of our control. But what can we control and manage those? And those things that are controlling, getting creative in the ways that we manage things, the ways we communicate, the way that we share things. We have a phenomenal business owner that within 2 days of being shut down back in March, April, whenever that was, she went from a traditional retail boutique to doing online sales and selling more online than she was doing in that quarter in sales the previous quarter, which is Christmas.
Wow.
So she's like, dang, I wish I'd remember this or thought of doing this. And all she was doing was just walking around her store with her daughter on her iPhone, just picking up an item and going, oh, this is, let me tell you the story about this. And she tells us the story about that. And then she tells how much it was. And in the chat, you just put if you wanted to buy it or not. And there'd be 3 or 4 of us trying to buy this bottle of water. It was crazy. And then we'd have curbside pickup, and she had it bagged and ready to go because she'd already gotten our credit card in the meantime. And so it's incredible. She's literally thinking about going back to that in a couple of her different stores just to manage employee count.
Yeah.
Well, think about it then. She can eliminate a lot of overhead if she went completely virtual and be even more, successful and financially ahead of the curve. So that's a fantastic story, Jill.
Right.
She could walk around her storage unit.
Yeah, this environment actually is pushing people to try to think in that way. I mean, Ben and I do similar work, and I think we've been forced to kind of be creative about how we approach our jobs too, and how we go forward and stuff. And same with you, David, and everything. And Lisa, what did you think? Lisa is one of my closest and dearest friends. What'd you think?
I thought it was great. I love the graphic of the creative process. I need a screenshot of that.
Well, you can ask me. I'll send you.
Yeah.
Alex, you need to call that your magic Aladdin's lamp, because it's a metaphor of the smoke and the rubbing, all kind of.
There you go. I'll do that.
I thought you were going to talk about shoes.
Yeah, yeah, it looks a little bit like a shoe, right?
Yeah.
But anyway,
Start some kind of a COVID brainstorming for businesses that they're just stuck right now, and having their customers, me being a customer, maybe having a different perspective that you can help people, think about things that, or maybe there's some element of what I do in my business that would work for them that they haven't considered. Because brainstorming is probably one of my most favorite things in the world. And if people are feeling stuck right now, even if my answer won't help them, it might kick off the answer in their head that will help them.
Yeah. It's interesting because right now all we're doing is we're throwing out tokens and we're all grabbing, see my little light
I'm
thing?
just happy to see all your faces.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time and everything. This was fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye, guys.